When I talk about the Buddy Seat Conference and when we consider planning for speakers, one of the ways that I describe it is that we want to be unique in how we think about our content. And so we really look for folks that challenge thinking, that are thinking about the future, and really helping you guys consider what does agriculture look like in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 15 years. And so this is really the focus of all throughout the day. But today's keynote is someone that I think fits that bill really well. He's going to come out and talk. I'm going to introduce him in a second. But I want to highlight one of our plans is to have a deeper Q&A. And so we will have Alex in the corner here. So when he's done speaking, I'm going to come out, facilitate a conversation. The plan certainly was for Jake to come out. I think Jake has a couple of opinions that may have been shared, but certainly I will try to fill in those shoes and really want to make this an interactive session as you start thinking about different things. I think if you have a chance to follow Vance, especially on Twitter or his podcast, you'll definitely learn a lot of stuff. There might be stuff you don't even agree with, but at least it gets you thinking differently, and that's really our goal today. And so I'll give a quick intro and get him up here, and we'll go from there. So Vance Crow is a communication strategist who has worked for corporations and international organizations around the world. He has spoken before more than 250,000 people, including the 250 we have here today, answering questions about some of the most sophisticated and controversial technologies in the modern age. Vance helps organizations realize why the general public doesn't agree with their perspective and offers new ways to communicate effectively, resolve disagreements, and build rapport with critics and stakeholders. So please welcome Vance to the stage.
So the title of my talk today is The Edge of Chaos. And I have to imagine that when you hear this talk title, you think, well, the person that gives a talk like that is either a fighter jet pilot or maybe a nuclear physicist, somebody pushing the envelope. But what I spend most of my time doing is recording the life stories of people to pass down to future generations. The thought that 85-year-old or 65-year-old people sitting there talking about their childhood and their ancestry doesn't really seem like the edge of chaos. But through my experiences, I've come to the conclusion that this is exactly what it is. And last night, I had an opportunity to talk with the people from Ledger. And we were having this great conversation about their business, and then after a little while, they were asking me about my work, and then, of course, the question comes up, all right, you've listened to hundreds, thousands of stories. Who sticks out to you? What are some of the best stories that you've heard? And as I get to thinking about this question, I realized it's not what you would think. It's not the person that snuck into Nazi-occupied territory and freed the leader of the Dutch underground. It's not the person that went from being poor to discovering something and radically changing their family's life stories, or somebody that did something big and important. In fact, if you've heard thousands and thousands of stories, you know that all of our lives are filled with experiences like that. What sticks out to me when I've listened to these stories is this emblem right here, the yin and the yang. Now, when I was growing up in a small town in central Illinois, I always thought that this symbol was kind of a one-dimensional thing, right? It was good versus evil, or maybe light versus dark. But as I've gotten older and I've had an opportunity to explore philosophy on a much deeper level, I've actually come to the conclusion that this is all duality in life. This is how all forces have to balance against one another, and this is where new things come from. And the way that I describe this duality, or the way that I think about it, particularly as I'm interviewing people, is that the light side is order, and the dark side is chaos. Now, order is everything in your life that you already know and understand. It's the parts of your life that you've integrated. In agriculture, this is something that runs deep. In fact, that's what makes farmers great. They've found how to do things, they put them in perfect rows, and they do this over and over and over and over again in order to be able to get the products of what they're producing. But see, the challenge is order cannot be maintained for so long. We live in a world where things are changing. They're always changing. This is nothing new, but we feel like, oh man, so much is changing, I'd rather just stay exactly where I am. But that's the importance of the chaos. You see, chaos is everything we don't know. It's the things we don't understand. It's the world that when we step out into it, all of a sudden, every rule that we thought we understood about how to operate, what to do, where our life was going, suddenly becomes on shaky ground. So our natural tendency is always to go towards the ordered side, right? We want to be where things are comfortable, where we understand how to operate. But the truth is, if you stay only on the ordered side, that's tyranny. You can't adapt. You can't change. Chaos is where we discover new things. Chaos is where we go to places and the world doesn't work the way that we thought, and you're able to find something important and bring it back to the ordered side. So when I'm interviewing people, it doesn't matter at what scale they venture into the chaos. The truth is, the best stories, the ones that are the most valuable that somebody can record and pass down to future generations, are not when everything went ordered. It's actually when things went wrong. It's when the world didn't operate in the way they expected. So a person that struggled and maybe was pulled under the water by a vice, or maybe they trusted the wrong person, or maybe they got into a deal that they didn't expect. The true value of these experiences is that you discover something new and you bring it back into the ordered world. Now, we don't want to have our lives thrust into chaos, right? It's actually, we don't want to change. That's why most change that occurs is that which we're forced into. We didn't want to change, but something happened and all of a sudden we're in a new space. But what if you could actually try and use these two forces, the order and the chaos, to discover what's coming next? What can I do to be prepared? And if you want to do this, that constitutes being right on the edge of chaos. Right at the edge between what you know and what is new and not understood. This is a deeply uncomfortable place. We would much, much rather go to the things that we already know are successful and we can just keep hitting that button again and again. But if you want to keep pace with this age of constant change, you have to get on that edge. And what it requires is the most valuable thing that you own. The most valuable thing that you own and control completely is your attention. Your attention is your bandwidth for changing the world. You can only pay attention to one thing at a time. No matter how many people will tell you you can multitask or I can do multiple things at once, no, the human mind can only pay attention to one thing. And if you want to be on the edge of chaos, just like surfing a wave or truly listening to another person, you have to give it your full attention. This is why I don't actually think about stories in terms of that story was great and those stories weren't that good, because ultimately, the most valuable stories come when you're paying attention to a person and they have this discovery about their life. I thought that that was a bad thing that happened. That was a deeply uncomfortable part of my life. But if you inquire further with a person and you ask them, what was the lesson you learned from that chaotic time? Often that is when they pull something out and they have a discovery, an epiphany, a sort of euphoria, because their life starts to click. They start to have an understanding. But we're going to talk about how can you be on that edge of chaos? How can you hone your attention so that way you can discover what's coming new and make changes before the change is thrust upon you. So one of the times that I encountered that was truly chaotic in my life was when I was invited to interview for the job Director of Millennial Engagement for Monsanto. That job title was as hilarious to me as I'm sure it is to you right now. And in fact, if you look at my biography, you would find that this is absolutely the wrong job for me. I ran a camp for inner city kids. I joined the US Peace Corps. I worked at the World Bank. If there is one thing that connects all three of those places, it is that everyone knew that Monsanto was evil. And so when I was offered the opportunity to interview for this job, I thought, well, who doesn't want to see inside of North Korea? So I decided to take the interview. And I remember being completely crushed the moment I came onto the campus. I don't know if any of you ever had a chance to see the Monsanto campus, but what I was imagining before I showed up, what I thought I was going to find was an 80-story building with dark storm clouds around it and everyone wearing black suits and Matrix-style sunglasses. So when I pulled onto campus, and it was a 2-story campus with a fountain, and the person that greeted me was wearing a sweater, had a ponytail, and her name was Holly, I was completely disappointed. But now, I want you to picture this. I don't know if anybody here has ever interviewed for a job that you don't want. This is about as much fun as you can have, because it doesn't matter what you say in the interview. So Holly leads me in, and I go into my first panel of interviews. And they are asking me questions like, what's your preferred management style? And I would reply, well, I like to have a goal and an objective, and I want people to just kind of get out of my way, and I'll accomplish whatever I need to. And why is it that you guys are poisoning the Gulf of Mexico? And they would answer me kind of with a tight smile, and then they would ask me another question. Tell me about your hours. What kind of hours do you like to be? I like to get into work early. At the time, I don't have any kids. I have all kinds of free time. I want to work as much as I can. Why are you suing farmers to death? I did this to these poor people for 7 straight hours. And the reason that I did it is because I thought, hey, this is at least going to be a good story that I can tell. And that's what I was expecting would happen. Until Holly came back into the office, and she sat across the desk from me. And she said, okay, we've just now finished 7 hours of interviews. Do you have any questions for me? And I said, yeah. You're hiring for this position, Director of Millennial Engagement, in a world that everyone knows that Monsanto is evil. How are you going to train a person to do this job? How are you going to train a person to go out and communicate that the world doesn't look the way that the rest of the world thinks that it is? And Holly paused for a moment, and then what she said next changed the trajectory of my life. She said, since you've been so curious, if we hired you, I think we would do what Monsanto always does. We would leverage what you're already good at. So I would write a list of 50 people from throughout the company, chemists, breeders, geneticists, farmers, and have you sit down and talk with them. You can ask them anything you want for an hour, and then after you're done with that list of 50 people, you and I will sit back down again, and we'll figure out what you do and don't know, and then I'll write another list of 50 people. And in my mind, at that moment, a light bulb went off, because I was like, these people are insane. They have no idea what I can do if I run around and ask people anything that I want. And one of two things is going to happen. Either I'm going to discover that they are as evil, and so is modern ag, that everyone in the world thinks that they are, in which case I'm going to go write the greatest tell-all book of all time, or I'm going to discover that what I thought I knew maybe isn't true. That perhaps we are growing food more bountifully than we ever have before in the history of time, and yet people are afraid and even angry about how their food is being grown. And so suddenly I had a new problem, because I had to go home and explain to my wife why I went from not wanting this job to deeply wanting this job. And there I was led into the chaos. So for the next 5 years, I spent all of my time working inside the company and then going out and talking about what is it that people are concerned about. I would go to college campuses, I would go to skeptics events, I would go to places that millennials gathered, and I would have deep and intense conversations with them. And what this led me to was a question, which is, I now know so much more about agriculture that it seems obvious to me that there's a duality here. Certainly, Monsanto was not perfect. They had all kinds of challenges, but yet people know so deeply that big ag is bad. Why is that? Where do ideas come from? Because if you're going to try and change culture, which was in effect what my job was, you have to know where do new ideas come from. And so, working with people there, I was able to come up with what we call the well-actually graph. The well-actually graph describes where new ideas enter society. So we can imagine we have one axis has value, right? All ideas have some discrete amount of value. And you can put that against the number of people that know that idea. So imagine you're in big ag, you're hacking away through the genome of corn, and ping, you discover something totally new and novel about the way roots grow. To that small group of people, the value of knowing that idea is very, very high. But the number of people that know it's very low. Now let's imagine that it's not just some piece of ag tech understanding, it's really any piece of information, like a stock tip, for example. And as it turns out, the more people that know and can act on that stock tip, the less valuable it becomes. And I always mark this point on the graph right here. This is when I would get a phone call from my mother who would say, Vance, I was watching CNN or Fox or MSNBC, and I heard them say this about organic farming. To my mother, those organizations were the cutting edge. This is where news happens. But everybody knows that these are large, slow, lumbering news organizations, and if you're trying to get your stock tips off of, broadcast news, you are not going to make any money at all. And one time I was giving this presentation, and a grain trader that worked at Monsanto came, and he took the marker out of my hand, and he goes, you know what, Vance? You're right. And here in ag, what we do is we wait for ideas to get all the way out here before we respond to them. And in fact, this was big ag's problem. They had waited until everyone knew that those ideas were what they were. And so my work was to figure out, how do we go back up this graph? How is it that we can move our way to closer to where ideas come from? So what I started doing was getting Monsanto and our teams to get into other news outlets. We would maybe do something a little bit smaller, like National Geographic or Wired magazine. Or I had the bright idea of inviting Vice in. That didn't go as well as I had planned. One of the things that you notice is as you go up that graph, the audiences get smaller and smaller, but the depth with which they want to know gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So I mark this point on the graph right here. This is where everybody's standing around at a party, and they're talking about the news of the day, and there's always that one guy that's waiting for a pause in the conversation, and as soon as he gets it, he jumps in and says, well, actually, and then they tell you about whatever it is that they know. And when they do that, they actually get to control the rest of the conversation because they know a little bit more than everybody else. Where are they getting their news became a deeply important idea to me. Where is it that those ideas came from that informed the well-actually person? And so a lot of my work focused on trying to get up the graph. Where do you find ideas that other people do not know about? They don't automatically agree with. And if you can make a change at that level of the graph with far less resources, you can start shaping the way that culture views things. Now, it is not enough to think, well, we just want to go to where the new ideas are coming from. You also have to think about how is it that people know what they know? And as I thought about this deeply and I was exploring ideas, I encountered this man right here. His name is Yosha Bach. He is literally the best follow on X. It is absolutely mind-blowing. Now, at the time, he was an artificial intelligence researcher, and 5 years ago, this was something people rolled their eyes at, right? They thought, well, I've tried to talk with my computer, it doesn't work. Now it seems obvious that AI is important, but at the time, it was not. And I found Yosha because he was giving a talk where he stood up at the lectern, and he was talking about, if you want to teach computers to think like human beings, you first have to know how do human beings know what they know. And so he said, we went away and we did 5 years of research. And what we discovered after 5 years of research is that human beings know almost nothing at all. Well, that can't be right. What do you mean? I flew here on an airplane. We have in our pockets the ability to have telepathy where you can send an idea from here to there in the blink of an eye. And he says, well, actually, if you understand how humans know things, what you find out is that human beings are not designed to know all things. We're designed to know one or two things very deeply that we can contribute to the tribe. But almost everything else that we know, we accept as a member of our tribe. And this is a part of deeply who we are evolutionarily. Because when we were living in tribal societies, it was more valuable to have the normative truth, to have the thing that everybody else already knows, more valuable than it was having the right answer. Because if you believed something that the tribe did not agree with, you could be pushed out, which would have been the most dangerous thing that could happen. And so, human beings are actually primed not to know the right answer, but to synchronize with other people, to believe and really fully think that the truth is whatever everybody else thinks. This explains so deeply why when you go on social media and try and correct what somebody is saying, they will fight you to the death on a subject they know nothing about. It is not because they are being a bad person. It is because it is deeply ingrained in us, and it happens with every single one of us in this room, that it is more important that the tribe sees us defending our ideas than it is for us to know what the right answer is. But this is what causes us to stay in the ordered side. This is deeply, deeply dangerous in a world where the pace of change is accelerating. I've heard it even called the age of acceleration. Because if you only believe what everybody else already knows and believes, you cannot help but have that wave crash over you. And so I want to think just a little bit more deeply about what kinds of ideas I'm talking about. And I think this can be best illustrated by a diagram made by a man named Stuart Brand. Stuart Brand runs an organization called the Long Now Foundation, and what it is designed to do is to say, how can we get people to think in the long term, the distant term? And so he picked the point of 10,000 years, and he said 10,000 years ago is about when human beings discovered agriculture. And so think of all the things that have happened between agriculture and now. We got pottery and weapons and space flight and satellites. All those things happened in the last 10,000 years. Where will we be 10,000 years from now? So he is a very deep thinker, and he came up with this graphic right here, which I think shows very deeply that things in the world change at different paces. You'll notice all the way down at the bottom is nature. Nature is always changing, but very, very slowly. Just above nature is culture. Culture at its core, this is what we believe in as a religion. What are our norms? What are the things that we do to interact with one another? It changes faster than nature, but not much. On top of that is governance, right? How is it that we are being ordered and structured? That changes a little bit more rapidly than culture, but still not very fast. And then, of course, infrastructure. How do we build our roads, the fiber optic cables, right? This is actual real work that has to take place. It can't change that fast, but it is changing. And certainly commerce. Everyone in this room knows commerce is changing really pretty fast. And finally, at that top layer is fashion, right? And Stuart shows this like squiggly line that's going backwards and forwards. It's because on the fashion layer, things change very rapidly. Sometimes they go backwards. Sometimes we're wearing 1970s clothes in the 2025, right? Each one of these layers represents how quickly things change. And if you can be aware of what is changing on these various levels, you can adapt. You can take on new technology. You can prepare your family for how things will be different in the future than they are right now. But the question becomes, how can you do that? I mentioned about the value of your attention. And so what I want to talk about now is where your ideas are. How would you know if you're on the edge, right? Is it just a feeling of discomfort? Maybe, That's probably a good indicator, but is it enough? So, what I want you to do right now, actually physically do it because it will change the nature of the answer, is write down the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Right? Actually write it down. Is it your spouse, your children? Maybe it's the people in a text chain that you're sending all those memes back and forth to. Maybe it's people that you're in an organization with, your work. As you're writing this down, keep in mind that if you're listening to somebody in a podcast, you're putting an earbud in your ear and you're listening to them, your mind cannot distinguish between you spending time with the person in reality and them whispering ideas into your ears. So on that list of 5 people should likely be where the media is that you're hearing these ideas from. And now that you have that list of 5 people, I want you to consider what I call the Peter Thiel paradox. I have a podcast. I run it every Thursday night at 6 o'clock Central. And I always have a different guest on. We talk about the news of the day. Then we talk about what I call the Bitcoin land price report. And then I ask them a question that makes everybody uncomfortable. This makes people uncomfortable because of the state it puts you in. The question is, what is one thing that you believe that almost no one you know agrees with you on? Now, the reason this question makes us uncomfortable is because it automatically hits that point I was talking about, tribal knowledge. We want to believe things that other people around us believe because that's safe. But you have to ask yourself, how far am I away from the ideas that we just kind of collectively know? And so when I ask people this question, it's called the Peter Thiel paradox because Peter Thiel uses it as a question for people he's hiring. Because he says this is a great way to test somebody. Because the very first part of the test is, if I were to ask you, you have to tell me something that I don't agree with, right? That's hard. Now, if you say something I already agree with, you failed. But if you do it in a way that I don't agree with the answer that you're giving me, well, now you've got a new problem. Now you've got to change my mind about something. And so asking yourself, do I have any ideas that are different than the 5 people that I spend the most time with? Because those 5 people are the people that will influence you the most. You are the mean of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So testing yourself to say, hey, do I get new ideas from them is good, but it also begs the question, do I have ideas that are different than my tribe? The other thing that I love asking people is about their worthy adversary. And what do I mean by a worthy adversary? Well, a worthy adversary is somebody that you respect, but you strongly disagree with. Now, the reason that I like this question is because respect is something that you can't decide to respect somebody. You either do or you don't. It is something that you feel. It's something, I don't know, all the way down in the soul, in the daemon of your mind. And the reason that we respect somebody, ultimately, I think, is because they can do something that you can't do. And when you observe that somebody can do something that you can't do, we respect them. But if you respect somebody, it's very rare that you would find somebody that you both respect and disagree with. But if you do, this is the person that can ground you in the world. They're the person that, you've got these ideas, you're persuasive, people are getting along with you, but if one of the people on your 5 is somebody that you disagree with strongly, even though you respect them, you can know that you're not just blindly going out into the chaos. You're not just allowing yourself to stay in the ordered part of the world either, because this disagreeable person will challenge your ideas. And if you want to be right on that edge, it is very important that you find somebody that can push you on your thinking. So coming to a conference like this, where you are hearing about a technology that maybe you are using right now, maybe the fact that you are using the technology indicates that this is on the ordered side, but it does not mean that it is the end of the line for you. Because what I found from talking to a lot of you is you're using it, but you need more of your customers to use it. You're using it, but it would be better if other people were engaging with this technology and trying new things. Well, that's where you can use these ideas, because it can help you to understand, how do I get somebody else to be coaxed into the chaos, into using an app that maybe makes them feel uncomfortable because they don't know how it'll work, or if they're going to be able to use it, or if they're going to seem foolish, or if they're going to make a mistake. But by either addressing whether or not you are pushing the envelope, are you trying enough new things, or asking yourself, are the people that I'm engaging with, can I help them get into the chaos, it will allow you to blossom. It will allow you to do that thing that makes life worth living, which is finding things that you didn't already know and agree with and bring them from the chaos into the ordered side. So I want to conclude with just a summary. There are very few people in this world that seek out new ideas. If you can be one of those people that goes out and finds ideas that you don't agree with, you will begin to find things that do help you. You will have to endure the ego loss of discovering things that you don't know how to deal with, and you will be a novice in these things. But if you do it, it will provide incredible value to you if you find the right ideas first. And finally, you must always have around you worthy adversaries. These are the people that if you're like me and you love diving headfirst into new ideas, they're the ones that are like, come on back here. Like, you can't just assert that. And if you're a person that loves being on the ordered side, you love having things under control, your worthy adversary is going to pull you into the chaos and make you challenge to find new ideas that make you uncomfortable, but will at its core help you discover the most important thing about life, which is discovering things that you didn't know and you didn't understand. But once you did, once you found that thing in the chaos, whether that's from a vice pulling you down or you going out and discovering something that made you uncomfortable but you can now use in your life, and you bring it back to the ordered part, that's wisdom. So I think that today is a great day for everybody throughout the entire experience that you have to challenge yourself, to ask people, engage them about what ideas do you have that I might disagree with, and have a great discussion. Be open to sharing with other people what that is like for you. You have no idea how much your life can change by just that one conversation where you trusted another person enough to explore the chaos with. So thank you very much for having me here today.